What if you could have a perfect work-life balance and be unable to remember your work while at home and vice versa? But what if this isn't as great as it sounds, and the work version of you is trapped in an office, unable to remember anything outside, not really knowing what you're doing, and unable to escape? This is the jumping off point for the hit Apple TV show Severance. Every week we're discussing an episode until we get to the thrilling conclusion. And if you're enjoying our discussion and want to be notified about episodes so you can watch alongside us, just hit that like and subscribe button and click that bell for notifications. And with that, Mark, I don't even know where to start with this because I am absolutely loving it. What are your initial thoughts?
Initial thoughts. This is a great show. From the first episode, right off the rip, I am thoroughly enjoying it. Trying to figure
Right
out
off the rip, like cold open,
the cold
right off
open.
the it pulled me in right away.
It was a beautiful scene where we're almost coming from it from her perspective, right? Like we don't know what's going on. We get these, just this disembodied voice talking to her and asking about a survey with no idea what's going on. She can't remember why she's there. And I loved how we saw that scene again later on through his point of view, where it was like this big ominous scene and he's just like kind of bumbling through like this orientation.
And I'm loving the camera work that is kind of helping to drill in some of the feelings. Like I don't know if you noticed that the speaker on the table was almost being treated like a person, where it had close-up shots on it when it was talking. It had like an over-the-shoulder shot, like going across it to her so that you can kind of see her reaction. And it's just such a weird juxtaposition of, because his voice to me is very friendly,
Yes.
and so there is warmth in there. So it's his voice is friendly, but his delivery is weird. It's his delivery seems off. We find out why later. And then add to that the fact that all of this, like this warm voice with this weird delivery, is just coming from this like cold, emotionless box that's just sitting unmoving on the table. Absolutely loved like the above shots, the over the shoulder. Like they're doing some cool stuff with the shots to really kind of frame things up.
Definitely. They are telling a lot of story through visuals as well. You know, you know me, I'm a big sucker for that color in the show, and I don't know if you noticed, there's a ton of color in this episode, and I feel like it is telling a story, especially with Mark. When he is in the building, he is wearing white and gray, and everybody else in there is wearing blue. She's wearing blue. The boss is wearing blue. The assistant to the boss has a blue tie. Everyone is wearing blue, and Mark is not wearing the right colors, which reflects similarly to the when they are eating dinner when he's outside of being severed. He is wearing red, and everybody that's grilling him is wearing this either orange and like gray or like navy, and it just has like I felt both of those with the color has shown like how Mark is kind of on the outside of both groups.
Yeah, they do really cool things with the visuals to help kind of convey information without using words, whether it's colors to show that he's different from the others, or I thought it was interesting the shot we see of him in the car when he's just like weeping. That first shot was from a distance, so it's looking through the front windshield of the car, and there's something partially obscuring our view, which to me, that's kind of voyeuristic. It's like somebody is there watching him. Because that's such a weird camera angle. Why not move a little bit over so you don't have something obscuring? It's almost like you're hiding behind that and watching something that you shouldn't be watching, which does kind of make me wonder. And we do find out he is being surveilled.
Right.
It gives you that impression early on. It gives you that, and that like creepy music is playing at that time, like that mysterious tune, that makes it seem like there's things you don't understand, and it may take a while for you to understand.
Right, and like the scale of the building when he goes into the building, and the shots that you see, like when he even just goes up to the reception desk, and you really don't know what to expect when you first see that. And, it shows him walk by the outline of, I think, is the founder, and I wonder if that is going to be relevant, if that person is going to be relevant. I have so many questions in this show, and I don't know where to
That's like
start.
that's like the majority of what I have is I have questions. I feel like some of the value that I may be giving here is maybe bringing up questions that some people didn't find yet, which maybe helps those kind of juices going and maybe helps somebody figure out something a little early. But that's where I am. It's like a lot of that is questions. But when you mentioned the lobby, once again, kind of going to the shots and the camera work, I thought the lobby, like they panned down so that you could really see, like this 5 floors, like vaulted ceiling, glass on top, so like natural light coming through. It's this huge building, and then you like juxtapose that against when he's going through the hallways where it's these like super tight shots. The camera is right in front of him. And so when he makes a turn, the camera makes a turn, or you have to have like a quick cut to see that turn happen. Like it really to go from like that to this was wild. There were a lot of choices. Did you notice the detail that they had around clocks and time?
Well, I saw that there were a lot of clocks.
A lot of
A
clocks.
lot of clocks. I saw that there were different clocks in different places, and then with him, he switched his watches
Yeah.
and he switched his shoes. And so I feel like the watch does have something to do with some part of the mystery because he had to switch it out. But I didn't notice. I noticed there just is a lot of clocks.
There's a lot of clocks. And so that gives us a pretty accurate idea of the time because we see a clock in so many frames. So, it's like 5 minutes for him to get from his car to his locker slash like the elevator. And then it's another 5 minutes to go through those winding hallways.
Interesting.
So it really and that's if there are no shenanigans going on. Because the fact
Right.
that he has to like have a company issued watch means I don't know, like they could have it change time when it's going up the elevator and you're going through the or going down the elevator. I'm sorry.
Right.
Because that's another weird thing is like he goes down to the basement and then takes an elevator that only goes down from the
Right.
basement.
Do,
So he's like going deep underground. There's this like huge, beautiful building, that looks like polished stainless steel
right. And they're in the
with so
basement.
much light. And then they're in the basement in these like really weirdly designed offices.
Yeah, the fact that it is so winding and huge down there, but it doesn't feel like there's a lot of people down there. Like we see that he's walking through these halls and he's able to, like, it's not frowned upon to be walking through these halls. You think it the length of those halls there would be one person that you would pass by, And there's even the comment that he makes when there's that open office, and it's like, oh, we're expanding. I don't know if they are. I feel like there is a secret part to this Severance program.
Yeah. It and that office, it was interesting that it was a different setup. It was like the purple carpets instead of the green carpets,
Right,
and the desks were looking at each other instead of being dead center, four desks, each one looking at a different person, kind of creating like a circle-ish thing where, somebody's
right,
looking at the next person. I agree with you. I mean, there are very clearly things afoot in
right.
this. And I think that Petey has kind of made that clear with his comment. The only thing is I don't know where that stops. Because I don't know if that's I mean we know it's not just in the building because we found out that Mrs. Coble is also or Miss Coble is also the neighbor, Mrs. Selvig. So she's obviously keeping an eye on him in the real world. Dinner party was sus.
Sus in what way?
Rickon, when he sees Mark, he says, "There's our captive." And at the end of the dinner party, he said, "Oh, they really enjoyed you." Like it was a show, and like Mark was the feature, like he was the real presentation. And that's kind of the feeling that I got with it, was that there was it seemed so fake to me. So these people they're trying to sound so smart. They're
Right,
pontificating, they're using all of these huge words, but their conversation to me actually sounded kind of dumb. And not because I thought it was pretentious, but legitimately at times sounded dumb. Like when the one guy was talking about, oh, it would have been a faux pas for you to call it World War One, and he turns it over to Mark, who it turns out that he
right,
was a history professor, and he's like, well, that's probably because there wasn't a World War II yet.
right.
So it's just like there was something really weird going on that, and it wasn't just the idea of like a dinnerless dinner. It was beyond that. I think my wife Dawn actually did a good job of kind of describing how I felt about it. It was reminiscent of Get Out, the movie,
Mm-hmm.
where there's that feeling of like all these niceties are happening, but like there's something else going on under the surface. So I don't know if it stops just with this company. I don't
I
think that, yeah,
I don't think, I could be wrong. I don't think it's as malicious as you think. So when I heard both of those conversations, to me it seemed like when he called him a captive, it was because Mark is been basically become a hermit where he like doesn't leave, doesn't do anything outside of work, and they were basically taking him, you know, against his will. That's that him being the captive. And then later, I did think it was weird when he like grabbed his foot to tell him that they really enjoyed you. I think he's just a really awkward dude, but I think when he said it that way, it's because I think we're at the anniversary of his wife's death.
yeah, that's the
And
impression I get.
yeah, so we're at that anniversary of the wife's death, and I feel like for the last year he's just been like a shut-in, and so he hasn't been making friends, he hasn't been talking to people, and so I think that was just that awkward guy's way of saying, "See, you can still make friends. Like they really liked you." I could be wrong. It could go deep into the family.
I don't know. Rickon, when he let drop that Mark had gone through the severance program, he, as soon as he said it, he looked kind of down and away instead of keeping people's gaze. It's like he knew that his wife was going to be disappointed with him and that he'd made a mistake in her eyes maybe. And so he was somewhat ashamed, but also that was kind of the point of this, and that potentially Mark Scout was the star of this. I
I
could be reading into things.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but I do feel like somebody that we do need to look at is this boss. And this kind of brings me to one of my questions, like how many people in this severance program are severed, right?
Right.
So like we go through, we know Mark's severed, we know Helly is severed. Those are the only two we know for sure. The other two guys in the office with them might not be severed. We don't know. The guy with the blue tie that seemed like the assistant, he might not be severed. And is the boss severed? Or the
No.
board? You don't think she's
Here's
severed?
here's here's my theory. If you have oh that my theory is if you have a first name, you're severed.
Oh,
So we've got Mark S, we've got Haley R, we've got with they didn't necessarily tell the other people's like last initial,
right.
but for some weird reason, when you're down there, at least maybe this is just like the people that are working in the macro data department are first name last letter, but there's something really weird about the fact that they made a point to point out the last letter, like Haley, your name is Haley, Haley R, and he's Mark S.
Right.
They're very clearly avoiding the last name for some weird reason. Like they're given just that information, but then we have first names. We have Mark S. We have Haley R. We have Petey. We have Dylan. We have Irv. Are the people that we have met that have first names and last initials, which is interesting because when they're going in the building, they're referred to as like Mr. Scout.
Right.
But then when they get down there, he doesn't know what his own name is. They could make something up. And we do know that his name lines up, but it's very specifically Mark S, not Mark Scout. And she's Helly R. And then we have Mr. Milcheck and Miss Coble. And it's possible that this is, they're in administration, and maybe that's like administration is uses that. But I did think it was interesting that they're using first names for some, last names for others. And I do think that that allows us to not necessarily know who Grainer is that Petey talked about in that bar and grill, because we don't know Milcheck's and Coble's first name.
Right. The thing that made me think that she wasn't severed originally was, we see in the survey, they ask 5 questions, right? They ask, who are you? Where were you born? Name a state. What's your mom's eye color? And I can't remember the last one.
What is Mr. Egan's favorite breakfast?
What is Mr. Egan's favorite breakfast? So that one is completely unknown to me, but it seems like the Severance program lets you know basic knowledge out there, but nothing that will that you retain that's focused
About
on
a
you.
specific person. That's you. Yes. That's what
And
I think.
and
And she
she
says,
well, she says two things at two different points.
yes,
She says, "My mom was
yes,
an atheist."
atheist.
And starts going down that rabbit hole. And so when she said my mom was an atheist, I was like, wait a minute. How would you know your mom's an atheist if you wouldn't even know your mom's eye color? And then later she said my mom's a Catholic. So either she, and this could also be another theory, is that she's not severed, but she's severed and has different memories implanted when she's the boss, and different
That's
memories
interesting.
outside. Like she's two
So
different people.
did did you did you look at that atheist comment?
Yes.
Okay,
Does
so go ahead.
does she think that the severance program is hell? Because she basically says humans can create hell, like, oh, it's not real, they're just morbid, yada yada yada. But whatever they can think of, whatever they can imagine, they can create. And I was wondering if she was severed and she thinks she's in hell because of it.
The the episode is called The Good News About Hell. And her mom says the good and bad news about hell. The good news is it doesn't exist. The
Bad
bad
news.
news is that whatever you can imagine, people can make. And then she goes on to kind of threaten him and say, do you know what, departments can be good or bad, and do you know what's the difference? The people. And all of a sudden, a new person has been introduced who, at least initially, is very combative. We've seen that she is not following norms, so it seems like Irv has been there for a while. In fact, based off the way he talks, he seems kind of old-timey to me. And so he's seen a bunch of stuff, and he seemed legitimately concerned when she was trying to break in there. And he said, she shouldn't be doing this.
She's gonna break down the door. That's
But more
right.
than that, it was something like she shouldn't be doing this was novel to him. And I think he's been through this for a while.
Right, because he was watching him do it. Like he was like helping him bring her in. Interesting. I didn't. Hmm. I thought that she was basically like the normal reaction of when people come in. Like that's what happens. Like they're always gonna ask to leave 3 times, and then you have to wait till that third time before you can break their reality of they're always gonna come back in here. Okay, I am wondering though if
Yep.
they're still like testing out the severance, like the way that it works, and like they still don't have it fully formed out because they're a tech and a medicine company.
Yes, that was the other one. Like, oh, I thought they were medicine. Oh, I thought they were tech. Oh, but they
So
were started in the 1800s.
with salves, like just these salves or something.
Yeah,
And so I was wondering if they are guinea pigs of like severance and of how the whole system works, which makes me think with that corridor, the winding corridor, if it's like an idea of that they're rats in a maze being
right.
tested on. So who knows? It's a
I
theory.
kind of wondered about whether maybe this isn't the first time this has been used, and it has been used for very unethical purposes. Because you could potentially have very good people do very horrible things. Because if
Right.
you cannot leave your work, and they can ratchet up the pressure and make work intolerable, they could potentially make people if work is all you know and it
Right.
just sucks, you might do whatever to appease those people. And so is that why it's controversial? Because once again, that one woman seemed to feel, her face right away seemed disgusted when she heard that.
Yeah.
Like it, you know if I had to pick a hot button issue, it seemed like abortion.
Right.
Like something like that hot button where she just like instantly was like, this is whichever side it was, she was like, I disagree with this
Right.
passionately, and I have personal reasons. Like something had happened to a family member or to her where it's like, this is offensive.
Right.
Because then it does get brought back to it's a choice.
Right.
Like you know what?
You
That
are
is that
choosing to come
person's
back.
choice.
Right. Do you think that Severance, like the Severance program, had anything to do with his wife's death?
Very possibly, because once again, I don't know where the boundaries are. Because I know that you don't believe it, but like this dinnerless dinner seemed like some kind of weird setup. So I don't know exactly where the like his office ends.
Right.
You know, because I do think that Mrs. Selvig is watching him. I don't think she's severed. I think she knows.
I do. Man, I go back and forth if she's severed or not because in when she's working, she hates Mark. She hates him. She said he's a bumbling idiot. He's
Yeah.
disobedient,
I've wished I could do
incompetent.
that to him many times, but
Yeah.
he's, you know, this position. We can't be doing that.
And then later she is very, and maybe this is like the red herring because she's like so sweet to him and she says you're one of the good ones. But then she does, like, after he leaves, she gets a little bit of a smile right right in the corner of her
Yeah.
lip. I don't know.
I do think that she is keeping an eye on him and she's using this dotty old person alter ego as a way to get into his life so that she can not only watch it, but so that she can try and keep him on the path of misery.
Right. To keep him coming back to
Yes,
Lumen.
I think that he needs to keep hitting the sauce. He needs to bury himself in his work to avoid this pain. So the pain can't stop.
Now we learned that the severance process is very controversial in this world. And I feel like it is a kind of, it's pretty controversial if you think about it, of like, is it ethically moral to create this version of yourself that has this weird concept of life? Like, Mark's best friend was Petey because this is the guy, since his birth, essentially waking up on that table, he's only known that existence. So of course, like, that's his best friend in the whole world, and he's just gone.
I think there's something going on that there's some public information we don't know about
Yes.
because the woman at the dinner party seemed almost offended when she heard that he'd gone through the procedure. It it seemed like a very divisive issue. Like I could see like the hairs raise on the back of her neck.
Right.
Um and she even at one point said, "So I guess we know where you fall on the congressional goings on." So this is also potentially a political issue.
Yeah.
Like who knows what is going on with this world that there is a procedure like this that exists.
Right.
Also that there is not clear information about what this company does because one person was like, "Oh, they they do medicine." Somebody else was like, "Oh, they do this." And it's
which
I there's
which is crazy because he talks about to that dinner party about like what his job is. Like he works in the records department. But the the show takes a moment to show you them working and doing something. But it doesn't look like
what the
they are.
fuck are they doing?
Yes, and like I'm feeling like if it was just record keeping and it was just boring stuff, they would have showed a very like I'm just typing, I'm putting in records, I'm just doing this. But they made a point to show that there's numbers, there's boxes, they're grabbing some of these numbers, they're putting them into these other boxes. Like there's a little bit
It's
more to
so
this
weird.
company than meets the eye.
There's a lot more than meets the eye. There is some weird stuff going on. And so, like I said, it for me, a lot of it raises questions like why are they working on old computers? What are they able to get away with since these people can't it doesn't matter what happens to them inside of the office. The only reason they're going to leave is if they're unhappy outside of the office. Like they don't
Right.
want to work anymore for the company. So they're kind of trapped in there. And so we hear about Bremer being incentivized. It turns out that like they're trying to be the get some reward for, macro data refinement, and that is going to get them some kind of like minor enhancement in their life because like you pointed out, that's their entire life that they know of. So
Right.
any tiny thing might be a huge quality of life improvement.
Right. What I did
There is some weird stuff.
definitely is. And what I noticed that this okay, so with this thing being so controversial, right? The very interesting detail is that Mark seems happier at work than outside. So like when we talk about the ethics of it, like if you're basically having this version of yourself basically locked in at work for 8 hours and that's their only existence, but yet he seems happier in there. Like that version of him seems happier than the outside version.
Is he happier or is he complacent?
Well, I mean, I would say he's happier
That like
because
that's all he knows. So it's
right.
I
But his outside life is so shit right now. He lost his wife. He is an alcoholic. We see him make multiple drinks. We found out his dad was an
yeah.
alcoholic. So like he is really not happy in the outside life, which brings up that question like I maybe it's not ethically great to make your person complacent there, but even that complacency he seems happier than outside.
Also, are they taking advantage of these people that are troubled? And are they doing what they can to keep them troubled? Like
Right.
is Mrs. Selvig keeping an eye on him when he's in the bar and grill? She's grilling him about where he is, who he's with, like all of these interactions of like having
Right.
issues with the bins, I think are to create touch points so that she is kept up on what's going on. And the one time that we saw Helly outside of the office, Mark was taking off his lanyard and looking down because of it, almost, ran into her. And she's carrying white flowers, which are often given to people, who are dealing with grief. And she just went in. So this would be, most likely like kind of like it seems like Mark went in to erase 8 hours a day of grief from his wife's death like a year ago. it seems like she may also have a fresh death that has caused her to turn to this. So are they taking advantage of people?
I think they are. I think they have to have this coercive underlying issue. And I feel like, okay, so the thing that Mark says to Haley is, you keep coming back. Right? Like, well, I'm stuck here. And it's like, no, you keep coming back. But it's not that person that keeps coming back. It's that other version of them that keeps coming back. That doesn't know what it's like on the inside and doesn't know, like, they could be literally tortured for 8 hours and just still coming
Crazy
back.
thing is, I think that the person on the outside is potentially trying to escape their life. The person on the inside, I think, has given up to the fact that they can't escape. That's totally up to the
Right.
person on the outside, who apparently is not ever going to make that choice. So both of
Right.
them are stuck in a very similar situation, similar but different,
Would you say that they're stuck in a half loop?
possibly.
I don't know if you saw the address that Petey leaves him
Oh,
is half loop. They're both in a half
that's
loop.
interesting. Interesting. I wanted to talk briefly about the music
Okay.
because I really dig it. There were two kind of main things we heard. There were variations of them. There was like the kind of mysterious song, which had a number of different variations. Sometimes it was just piano, sometimes there was like strings in there, but it gave this kind of like unsettling feeling, this feeling of like unease that there's something going on underneath the surface we're not aware of. There was something that was the exact opposite of that, as soon as he goes down the elevator and doesn't know what his past life is like. There's this jaunty tune, that
Right.
I think kind of was kind of like what you're talking about, that he seems happier under there.
Right.
I still would argue that it's like complacent, like he doesn't know what true happiness is because this is
Right.
his only world.
Right. Doesn't even know if he has a
Um,
family.
right. And but at one point when he's going to Miss Cobell's office, it's doing, once again, he's going through winding corridors, and so it's doing that kind of jaunty song. And right before he went in, it laced in a little bit of that kind of mysterious tune. And so I liked how they kind of did that, how they could like lace different parts and how well they're kind of using this music to delineate the two worlds. I'm interested in seeing if there's other tunes or if we just kind of rely on these, but I have enjoyed them so far.
I have too. The other thing I've really enjoyed is the subtle humor it has. Like, this is a pretty funny show. And it is taking like this very like serious topic with this serious like ethics to it and just finding really clever ways to make it funny.
The cast and director, I think, are more known for their comedy than than their drama. The
Right?
drama is so good, but I love the fact that when they're ready for that joke, the timing of it is so perfect.
It's
It's
really
it's
good.
delivered. Oh my God, the jokes have been phenomenal. There's not a ton of them, but they are just executed perfectly.
Yes, with everything with the Rickon thing, with like his, part of being part of that pretentious group with the beds, wakes up in the morning with oh, you smell like a distillery, and he's like, oh yeah, I just couldn't go to sleep with the memory of having to switch beds at a young age. Like, just so good. And of course, great delivery. You know, all of the jokes land. Like, I feel like, when we talked about Utopia back then, a lot of those jokes feel a little forced, especially the US version. None of the
Yes.
jokes feel forced here. They all land, and it brings a small bit of laughter to this little serious ethical question.
Yeah. And I think the last thing that I wanted to briefly mention, and I know that you don't necessarily have any knowledge of this, so I won't spend too long on it, but this reminds me of a great show I remember from my childhood called The Prisoner, which they did try and do a remake of, which didn't get past a season, but it's got some similar kind of feeling of it, of, somebody being taken out of their life and put into this weird society with like rules and ways of doing things, and it kind of like some of the things that they do and say kind of feel cult-like. Like they're trying to make everybody the same, kind of like homogenize them and make them less individual. It's got that like mystery bubbling under the surface the entire time. Very different in many ways, but also very similar in some ways. And I just kind of liked that kind of feeling and that vibe. And if you haven't watched that classic show, The Prisoner, highly recommend it, even though it's old.
I have not seen it, so yeah, I definitely should give that a try. And with that, I believe our journey has come to the end on The Road Goes Ever On and On. And definitely check out Prisoner if you haven't checked it out yet. I'm Mark. This is Sterling. Join us next time as we follow episode 2. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.